A common answer in the church today when a Christian is asked a question about the Bible that they don't know the answer to, they will simply come back with, I just have faith. And I think because of things like that and conversations like that, the idea that faith is just this blind hope in something, even though there's no evidence for it, is widespread. But faith is more than that. Faith isn't blind. And I'm pretty sure I'm telling you something that you already know. But the two verses that I hope you have highlighted in your Bible, and I hope you have maybe written down in the back of your Bible, are Hebrews 11:6 and Hebrews 11:1, both of which remind us what true faith is. Hebrews 11:6 says the phrase that he is, twice in a row. If someone is going to come to God, to know God, to approach God, they must first believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those that diligently seek him. Real faith involves believing that God is, that he exists first, and then that he is a rewarder of those that diligently look for that God. Second verse is Hebrews 11:1. It says, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. The two key words there being substance and evidence. Substance, something substantial. Evidence, evidence for something that you can see, that you can test. Now, God doesn't provide evidence for every single thing that he does or says or claims, does he? I think he does. Maybe in a more broad way in some cases, but allow me to explain. The Bible can be proven to be God's word, and it can be proven to be inspired. And so, if we can prove that the Bible is not of this world, that the Bible is a book straight out of God's mind, well then we can take every account that's in the Bible, word for word and literal, and we can have evidence for it because we know that the Bible is in fact from God. Now there's more evidence than just that, even though that's quite frankly enough. There's more evidence than that, and with some accounts like a worldwide flood, we know that the Bible said it and the Bible's inspired, so that should be good enough. But also, look around. You can see evidence in the world today that there was a worldwide flood. But if you look at how God has proven his existence in the past, we see that he's always attempted to do so. If you look at the Egyptians, they didn't believe in the God of Israel, the God of the Bible, but they still believed in several gods. And obviously, Egypt is not the only culture that believed in several different gods that were not the God of the Bible. But that begs the question, why do we look up? Why do we look for something else? It's because we're programmed with this curiosity and with this knowledge that something is missing. After all, we are created in the image of God. God, when he created us, breathed into us the breath of life. He put something inside of us that is a part of God. Now, I don't know all of the details to that or what exactly that means and how much we are in God's likeness, but I do know that the part of us that is like God is that soul that he placed within us. We're eternal beings. We're going to live forever, just like God, somewhere. So when you look at the Egyptians, they looked up, they looked around, they searched, and what they found was the Nile was a source of life for them. And because they couldn't live without the Nile, they assumed the Nile must be a god. Same with the sun, same with many of their other gods. And you can see that, and you can see the evidence for it in the way that they arranged the pyramids. The pyramids themselves, the fact that they were these rooms filled with treasures for those pharaohs to take to the afterlife, and they were so exotic, and they took so much time. But also the Sphinx, and also the hieroglyphics that you can read that have all these pictures and depictions of the several gods that they had. Well, they were advanced as a nation, but only really advanced to a point. In fact, some of the Egyptian doctors believed that if you got a splinter, then what you should do is you should wrap it in dung. That is how you heal that splinter. That's how you take care of it. Well, obviously, we know that if you did that today, if you had a wound and you put dung on it, then there's a good chance it's going to get infected. But when you look at the Bible, in Genesis 17 and verse 12, we see that there are things within the medical field that we did not know as a society until years later. For instance, in Genesis chapter 17, it mentions that the child is to be circumcised. The newborn child is to be circumcised on the 8th day. Now that might seem like, well, it's just a cultural thing or a religious thing, and it was because, well, God told him to do it. But on the 8th day, the vitamin K within a baby's body has reached its highest point at that point, and it can now clot the blood and help the baby from completely bleeding out. Well, we didn't know about that until years later, but God did, and he told the Israelite people, this is how to take care of yourselves and to take care of your little ones. Leviticus 17, verse 11, a very popular verse within the study of apologetics, it talks about how the life is in the blood. But if you remember, in 1779, George Washington died. And part of the reason why he died is because the doctors practiced this technique of getting rid of a sickness called bloodletting. And they believed that sickness, when you became sick or when you had a disease, that sickness was in your blood. And so in order to get rid of that, they would cut you and they would drain the blood out and drain the bad blood out of your body. Not very scientific, but that was in 1779, not 5,000 years ago. And God already knew that, and he told his people because he loved his people and he wanted to take care of them. So we look at the plagues as proof, going back to Egypt. And I go back to Egypt because they are an ancient culture. They are one of the first cultures that were able to write in some form or fashion. They were intelligent. They were advanced. But when God was trying to prove to both his people and to the Egyptians that he was the one true God and that he was Jehovah the Almighty, then he attacked, in a way, he attacked those Egyptian gods. He made it go dark, and their top god was the sun god Ra. And so God made it darkness over the whole land there of Egypt to prove that he was stronger than Ra. Same with the Nile. He turns the Nile to blood. He's more powerful than the Egyptians' Nile god. And that they had a god for frogs and for insects and for flies and for the diseased livestock. In fact, or for the livestock themselves. In fact, the Pharaoh thought that he was a god and that his son was the son of a god. And so when you have the death of the oldest, of the firstborn, God is showing that he is more powerful than Pharaoh, who claims that he is deity. And Pharaoh is absolutely helpless to the fact that he can't stop his son from dying, even though he supposedly had some kind of divine powers. You look at Exodus 9:29, that basically proves everything that we've been talking about up to this point. Exodus 9:29 says, so that you may know. God is saying that to Moses, so that you may know that I am God. And that was the point. And that was the point of Jesus' miracles in the New Testament. He did these things to prove that he was the Son of God. So we look at Exodus 20, verse 3. God says that you shall have no other gods before me. And that really leads into a whole other theological discussion about why would God, if he was a true and loving God, why would God command the Israelites to completely kill and slaughter all of the Canaanites, including the women, including the children? And you can read about that in Deuteronomy 20, verses 16 and 17. God explicitly tells the children to kill all of them, every single one. If they are a Canaanite, kill them. And so, of course, understandably, there are people that look at that and say that cannot be the God that we serve today. Or they'll say something along the lines of, that's not my God. That's not the God that I serve. Well, yes, it is. And it makes more sense when you look into really who God is in the first place. Maybe something more simple to help this concept and this idea stick is that You can have an artist, a great painter, and that painter can spend days and maybe even months painting this masterpiece. And it's this giant canvas, and when he's done, I mean, it is a beautiful masterpiece, and it's worth a lot of money. Now, if I went up to that painting and I burned it, who would be in trouble, me or the artist? Obviously, I'd be the one facing who knows what, maybe even prison time, depending on how expensive that painting was. But if the artist were to burn up that painting, technically he has the right to do that because he is the creator of that painting. You know, humans don't have the right to murder, to take the life of someone because they choose to, or because they're angry, or because we deem it necessary to kill someone. That's wrong for humans to do. But for God, it's not wrong for God. We are God's creation. We are God's painting, if you will. And only God, because He is God, has the right to choose who lives and who dies. But it also goes deeper than that. God knew that the Canaanites, they were pagan. They believed in several other gods. They would lead the children of Israel away from God's presence. They were going to make life so much harder for the Israelites. And so God basically wants them to get rid of all the Canaanites so that they're not influenced by their pagan beliefs and practices. And we already have seen from the Israelites being in Egyptian bondage that the Egyptian culture influenced the Israelites. And you can see that even in the calf that they built that represented God and his power, very Egyptian-like. And the craftsmanship, their language, I mean, all of that was just very heavily influenced by Egyptian culture. Okay, so what's the big deal, right? I mean, if you believe in a God, you see those bumper stickers that say coexist, and there's all these different cultures that believe in several different gods. So what's the big deal? If you believe in a God, even if it's not the right one, isn't that still good enough? There are some people that do have that mindset, and they think, well, they do believe that there's a God, and even in some cases, they're very similar to our gods. So is it close enough? Is it good? Well, here's why it's a big deal, and why we have to make sure that the God that we worship, the God that we serve and surrender our life to, is the one true God and the God of the Bible. Here's the big deal with believing in a God other than the God of the Bible. Number one, paganism is plagiarism. Paganism is giving credit to another God, or idolatry is. It's giving credit to another God for the work of the one true God. It's giving credit to a God that doesn't even exist for the in place of the one true God of the Bible. That'd be like if you were the painter and you painted this wonderful masterpiece, and someone took that and they put it in a museum and they put their name on it, and then they sold it, and they took all the money that you spent all that hard work on in creating that painting. It's like that, but on a much, much bigger scale. We do know that God is a jealous God. We read that also several times in the Old Testament, and even in the New Testament we read about the jealousy of God. And again, it's not jealousy as we think of it. It's more, but it is possessive, and God can be that way because, well, he's the only one that can be that way and has the right to be that way because he's God. But number two, why it's such a big deal is that idolatry is a waste of time. If you want to see case in point, you can look at the Stonehenge, or you can look at the Easter Island heads that you have, massive sculptures that took so much time. For what? The praise of another God, of a God that doesn't even exist. All of this time, and we know that from the book of James, that life is a vapor, life is precious. What we do with our time matters. And you see the pyramids that the Egyptians built, and all of these mega structures and things that took so much time for a God that's not real. You can look at the Mayan temples. There's the temples in Angkor Wat. Pretty much every culture that believes in several other gods or believes in a God other than the God of the Bible have spent a lot of resources and a lot of time spent doing something totally fruitless. And in the case of the Easter Island heads, it's that there's one theory that actually the creation of those Easter Island heads led to the extinction of the people because they used up all of their resources. They chopped down all the trees to move these island heads. They spent all of their time doing that and not prepping for, well, season and war. And they faced famine, and they basically wiped themselves out trying to honor a God that does not even exist. Number 3, and maybe this is a no duh reason, but it's insulting. It's insulting to give credit to a God that is not the God of the Bible because they're fake, they're shallow, they don't exist. But God has proven that he does exist, and you can look at that by looking at the evidence that we have for his word. Very quickly, you have the prophecy proof, and you have the fact that 700 years before Christ, Isaiah is predicting and making very accurate predictions about him. Isaiah even calls out, or maybe it's Jeremiah, one of the two. They even call a king by name, Darius, and calls him by name. And that king shows up years later, going by that name, doing and accomplishing and the things exactly as Isaiah said. Maybe one a little bit more familiar to you. And me, I didn't even look into the Isaiah prophecies to throw out there as an illustration, but the book of Daniel, it's prophecy about the church, the stone that rolls in and totally collapses this tower, and each layer of that statue represented an empire that was to come and that would fall, and the ones that would rise and fall, and in that order. And very, very accurate in its depiction there. We don't have time to go into each section of that statue, but it's very, very cool, and I'd encourage you to look at that yourself. But also you can look at, lastly, we talk about the moral argument. And I know this is a lot of information in one video, but there's one God and you can use the moral argument. We all have pretty much the same morals. We believe that stealing is wrong. We believe that lying is wrong. We believe that murder is wrong. By and large, as a culture, as a people, as humans, we have those things ingrained within us that these things are wrong. Well, who's to say what's wrong and what's right? There has to be one truth. And that truth, that standard is set by one God, the God that created us all. And you can look at the design arguments and several others. But also, last one is that the God of the Bible is the only God that has ever offered any kind of proof. The God of the Bible is the only God that's offered any proof for his existence whatsoever. There is no evidence for another God except for the God of the Bible, Jehovah. It's the evidence that has stood the test of time, and it's the Bible is a book that really encourages you to question it, to doubt it, not doubt with the intentions of just trying to find anything and everything just to disprove it or to satisfy you, but something that to make you dig and to look and to research, and by doing that, you strengthen your own faith. Anyway, I hope that was a helpful video to you. We've been talking about a lot of this stuff in the teen class at Farley. It has been a very enjoyable study for me, very faith-building for me. And so if you're looking for a Bible study to go through or something to look into for your own personal benefit, I think looking at maybe some of those Christian evidences for the Bible, some of those passages, and they're very faith-building. I know this was a longer video this week, and I'm going to try and keep them back to that 10-minute range this coming week. There was just no way to fit all of this information into one 10-minute video, but I hope you're having a blessed Sunday evening, and I look forward to seeing those of you at Farley on Wednesday.